And we're here at 2024 PropTech in San Jose, California. I'm Lisa Woods with Realcomm, and with me is David Stoller, who is the Strategic Development and Client Relations for the Americas for FPC Global, and Brian Vaughn, who's Global Head of Technical Consulting for FPC Global. Hey guys, how are you?
Good. How are you doing today?
We're doing good. You? Doing good.
Great.
Yeah, doing great. Now, is this your first, Brian, I don't think this is your first PropTech. David, is this the first time you've been in PropTech?
No, I think this would be my seventh, actually.
Okay, good. Good.
I don't want to compare numbers, but in that same ballpark, I would say.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, we're glad to have you. I'm glad we had a chance to get you to the desk and have a conversation.
Sure. Yeah, I'm excited. It's my first time at it, so I'm looking forward to it.
Good. Well, for those of us in the audience or people in the audience who may not know about FPC Global, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So FPC Global is a professional services firm focused on delivery of services across IT and OT infrastructure on a global level. So what that means is, there's a lot of terms that people have used over the years, whether it's technical consultant or MSI or digital operations group, and we cross several of those categories, but specializing very much on services delivered. We don't resell products. We're not a vendor. We're very focused on delivering services to our clients wherever they may be in the globe. Okay,
and you're a global organization, correct? What does that mean exactly from your perspective?
So I'll just start with, I have a team of consultants in every continent. We've done work in 6 out of 7 continents.
Yeah,
right?
Antarctica's still waiting for that one. We're hoping
Haven't
one day.
really gotten down there yet, but yeah. So I have, from the consulting side, we have 34, 35 consultants, and I have coverage within each region, within each country, so that we can sit down face to face with vendors for clients and really work out things locally within their own within their own areas of complexity and regional needs.
So I think what it adds to, from a delivery perspective, having people that are on the ground who speak the language, who understand the local codes and compliance requirements, understand the global vision of an organization, but also taking it down to the ground and understanding what needs to do to achieve that is very unique.
Right. So what do you feel are, big organization in the commercial sector, corporate sector, big portfolios. What are some of the challenges that you've heard from clients about scaling on these big projects?
Sure. So there's 2 things. The first one I would say would be stakeholder engagement, which I think is primarily driven, or the issue there is primarily driven because we look at technology first often when we try to have solutions, rather than having the people and process and the stakeholders actually driving the innovation. We come to a show like PropTech or CRETech or Realcomm and all those others that we come home and we're like, oh, we really saw this cool demo. We want to incorporate this into our portfolio or our platform. It'll save us all sorts of money. And then we try to figure out how to do it, right? Stakeholders need to start talking about what's going to change from the people and process perspective, getting those requirements in alignment, and then getting the technology to fit that. And then the other part too is the second component is establishing the program to support the technology as it scales. Because we do the pilot, we do the initial first year, there's always the white glove service, there's the additional professional services that come with the software or the hardware or solution that's being provided. And then after that, it's like forgotten about. And when the sensor falls off the wall, it's sitting there on the floor and nobody knows what to do with it.
Yeah. Right. David, what goes into the programs and the framework for a successful deployment?
Oh, I mean, there's so much that is considered throughout the process, and I think a lot of that is there's kind of there's the table stakes things that are there, and then there's the unique things to a client's requirements, right? So every client has very specific goals, whether it's security and efficiency, operational insights, and so creating a program to support those fundamental goals is really important. But the things that we're considering is ostensibly anything that we don't have an answer for. So it's the what if question, and then we go, well, what if something breaks? Well, then how do we handle it? What if somebody hacks us? How does this result? And so what we do is the program is really built up of thousands of these what if questions, and then documented and categorized into documentation for organizations to be able to use and reference as they move forward, so they can ensure that these programs are successfully deployed, but also continuously operational, and they can quantify those returns on investment that they've made.
And having come from 2 large FM service providers in the past, I've always gone down in the basement in the engineering office, and there's binders on the wall that tell you how to operate the building. There's 20 of them easily. We don't do that with technology, so that's the part that has to go into that detail as we become more reliant on what the technology is delivering. It used to be just keeping the temperature correct. As that temperature is feeding into analytics to determine like how well is the space being utilized, occupant comfort and other things, that data point becomes more in demand, which requires puts more eyeballs on it and more need for it to be correct. So we need to establish that the same level of infrastructure and support on those programs to define the maintenance of that system, the responsibilities, the roles for everybody to perform in that regard, and then also like making sure we have the right specifications to get that stuff integrated into the right setup to align with how the client can best manage that, along with the other programs that they do for their business critical systems.
Have you seen an acceleration in the adoption of these frameworks?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for 10 years ago when I first started doing this, we were all just kind of trying to put pilots together to see what technology can do and how it worked. And I think we learned over the years that without a framework, that nothing really does work. We would do that. I think a lot of people were doing pilots all over the place and then going, this is a really cool thing, and then it never materialized. It really just metastasized and fell apart. And so we're seeing many more organizations. Some of them are deciding, because of whatever strategic goals they have. Some of them are developing those organizations and frameworks internally. Some of them are partnering with organizations like FPC Global. But we're seeing definitely more and more because they've understand that it's critical to the success of these programs that they're trying to deliver.
Right.
Yeah, I would also echo that. I've seen more specific presentations on companies actually going through that process of developing the programs and the process and the RACIs, et cetera, and specifically talking about that as well, which is super helpful for others to hear that too, because I think it's getting more visible that a lot of the startup software providers have been doing that on the side to help make sure that their pilots and everything are successful. But once that part is done, like what takes over, right? And that is preventing us from getting to that year 2, year 3 component and making sure that these things are around as long as the buildings are. And I think the other part driving this too is as people adopt technology that may be provided from another service provider, when they change providers, we were talking about that earlier today, was having expecting that your stakeholders are going to change, your needs are going to change, the political environments are all going to change. So the only thing that pretty much stays consistent is like the facility and the hardware within it. The software, the consultants, myself, like we all move in and out of these facilities, and having that ability to build that expectation into your program and that framework, I think has been a piece that companies have been learning as they've changed service providers, and people take their toys with them and then they're left with no toys to play with. They're like, I thought those were ours.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and too, with the change that you're talking about, that sense of or that approach of being agnostic really plays into that, right? Because as things are changing, they're not locked into something, into this lane that they can't get out of. And with you guys being agnostic in your approach and in the convergence of everything and how you lay out the framework and how you construct it, it makes a big difference, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we were, a great example is we were on a call with a potential client the other day, and they had recently switched between IFMs, and they didn't realize that half of their smart building data was not theirs, right? And so they spent 12 years with this IFM, 6 years on the program, and 6 years just disappeared out from underneath them. And so they're working with a new IFM, and they're going, well, how do we internalize these processes? How do we create what is mission critical to us, understanding what that is, and then building the capacity so that as they move forward, they can internalize that.
And that makes it a little more difficult. That makes your job a little bit more difficult too, right? Because then they're sort of a little hesitant.
So, well, I think, I mean, it can, but in these instances, I think a lot of what they're trying to do, I think a lot of our clients are trying to they understand that the value of the data that they're capturing is instrumental to their decision-making process, and the idea that they're not able to get it for whatever reason, or they don't have the ownership and equity stake of that ownership, right, or of that IP. Those are all things that they're starting to realize they need to have better control over and make it so that it's something that, regardless if they move your access control vendor or a different BMS vendor or a different consulting vendor or IFM, like none of that can be disrupted, right? And so.
I think,
Right.
like I had an idea there. Sorry, literally was about to speak, and then it just fell out of my head. Where was that? Oh, it was really good too. We're editing this piece, right?
Yeah.
Agnostic.
Well, you can come.
I know. I remember now.
Did you
I remember. I got it.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
I'm good. All right. So
1,
pause.
2, 3.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the consultants have been agnostic for years, right? It's
Right.
not been an issue for consultants to be able to sit with different vendors, understand their products, understand what the technology is behind it, so they can sit down with owners and help go through that selection process. So that's something that from like the technical consulting piece that we've been doing for last 10 years with FPC, as we get into the MSI and the helping to deploy technologies on behalf of the client, right? We're still trying to focus on what the client's needs are and helping them onboard their portfolios into these different software platforms or solutions. That conversation is a little bit harder because the market has typically been the service provider and the vendor have been in a relationship,
Right.
and there's different reoccurring revenue streams or commissions and some other things that don't come into play if you're trying to stay independent. So that's definitely going to be a challenge. So it's, but I think it's what the industry needs, and I'm excited for that component for us.
To add on to that, I think it's really important because if you're a service provider who's integrating these systems and your incentives are mixed, right, or weighed in some multiple different ways, it ultimately undermines the ability to deliver effectively, right? Because your incentives in those instances, whether you're a platform provider or hardware provider, when a challenge does inevitably occur, because things do go wrong, that's just a fact of
Right.
life, right? The likelihood of identifying the challenge being your product or software is very low, even if it is, right? So having someone who's agnostic and is not tied to the products can have a very unbiased evaluation of where the challenges in that project are occurring, and then making mediation recommendations that are not tied to their pocketbook because they're tied to a product or software platform.
Right. Well, what do you think is maybe the top 1 or 2 things that really sets your organization apart from others in the space?
I mean, I think first of all, to your point, that agnosticism is really, really important across our entire portfolio. We don't have any reselling agreements. We're not a vendor of any type. We have advisory agreement partnerships with some of these so that we are aware and have the technical aptitude to work within them, because some of these are ubiquitous all over the country, all over the globe, and so knowing them is important. But not being tied to them in any particular financial way is important. That gives us a huge advantage, I believe. The second part for me, is our global capacity. I think that's unique in the market. There are very few organizations who are global organizations that are as flat as we are. Most of the global organizations that I've worked in the past life that were in the space were segmented by country, segmented by product category, segmented by region, segmented by all these different ways. And so the challenges would often be a global client wants to adopt something across the portfolio, and I would have to call up the country team in Saudi Arabia, and they go, well, we don't really do that right now, and so we're focusing on this other thing, and so it became a challenge in order to deliver service. Our global status allows for us to do that. We're not fragmented in that way. We're not a matrix organization.
Okay.
I also think just the people for us,
Yeah.
like we've kind of targeted a unique skill set of people that join our organization. We're a little bit more hands-on than a traditional consultant, but not as much as the actual like OEMs that are deploying this piece. So a lot of our team comes from that background. So we are able to sit across the table with them and actually understand their product, how it works, because most of my team's done that before, and they can help make sure that the product is getting deployed the way that the client wants it.
Okay. Well, I think we're almost out of time. One final question: is there anything in particular you'd like to leave with with the audience?
Oh, that's a great question. I think what I would like the audience to take a moment to evaluate is, when evaluating a smart building program, it's important to, we have all the technology available in the world. The technologies, and it hasn't resolved all the problems and challenges. Take a moment to look inside and say, what people processes do I need to implement in order for this to be successful? And if I haven't planned it, how do I start to make that plan, to understand what that looks like?
Yeah, and for me, Lisa, the key thing is, obviously I'm hoping there's some leadership watching this video as well at some point. For me, the thing I've been kind of pushing for the last 2 or 3 years is the fact that I'm looking for our real estate leadership to look at their team and having the understanding and the value of getting their teams to events like this, so we can continually teach and train the people coming up behind us, the future leaders of our groups. Because I often feel like, no offense, but there's a lot of familiar faces at times, and it would be great to see more new faces, putting more of that challenge out there to get some of our younger colleagues and stuff engaged and learning from these things.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. We talk a lot about how to bring up the next generation and move our knowledge base from us to them, and get younger people interested, involved, engaged. So absolutely.
And I think to that point, I worked on a project recently with a couple 20-year-olds that were doing a small little development in where I live in Nashville, and they were looking at something, and they built a tool on their spare time that solved a huge industry issue, and they're going off and starting a business now. But for us, we always just assumed that was the way the industry worked, and they view the world very differently, and so it's a bi-directional learning opportunity. They see things this younger generation sees and explores things very differently, and so we have the knowledge and experience that we can share, but they can definitely we can learn a lot from what they're doing. I like that as well.
Absolutely. Well, it was really a pleasure having the two of you here.
Likewise.
David,
Absolutely.
Brian, glad you could join us, and hopefully you'll come back, and maybe we can do this again in June.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you.
Bye-bye.